The sound didn't belong in winter. Snow swallows noise. It eats footsteps, muffles breath, turns the world into a padded room. That's why the scream didn't make sense. It cut clean through the night. Sharp, human, and close. I froze at the cabin door, one glove half on, breath fogging the glass. The forest beyond the porch light stood still. Black trees locked in white. No wind. No animals. Just that scream, echoing once, then stopping as if someone had clamped a hand over a mouth. I waited for it to come again. It didn't. Silence rushed back in, heavier than before. The kind that presses on your ears until you start hearing things that aren't there. Your own pulse, the creak of wood, the slow grind of your thoughts turning against you. I told myself it was the lake. Ice shifting. People always blamed the lake. Still, I didn't step outside. Inside the cabin, the radio crackled. An old emergency channel I hadn't tuned in weeks. A voice bled through the static, thin and trembling. If anyone can hear this, don't go out after dark. It learns the paths. The transmission cut. The lights flickered. And somewhere in the trees, something moved, slow, deliberate, toward the cabin. By the third week of January, the cold stopped feeling like weather and started feeling like intention. It crept into the cabin slowly, testing corners, slipping through seams in the walls no amount of insulation could seal. At night, the temperature dropped so low the air itself seemed brittle. Each breath felt borrowed. Each sound, wood popping, ice shifting, the faint tick of the lantern, felt amplified, as if the silence was listening. I had come to White Elk Lake to disappear. Not dramatically. Not in the way people imagine when they think of running away. I didn't want to vanish. I just wanted nothing to look back at me. No emails. No conversations that started with, "Are you okay?" No rooms filled with memories that refused to stay quiet. The cabin belonged to a man I barely knew. A friend of a friend who said only one thing before handing me the keys. Don't stay past winter. I laughed at the time. Winter arrived early that year. Heavy snow sealed the logging road before December had even finished unpacking itself. By New Year's, the world beyond the trees might as well have stopped existing. No phone signal. No vehicles. Just forest, lake, and the long aching dark. At first, it was peaceful. Mornings began with the blue light of snow reflection creeping through the windows. I'd split logs, melt ice, cook from cans, and sit on the porch while the lake breathed. Slow groans rolling beneath the frozen surface. Locals called it ice talk. Pressure. Natural. But natural things don't feel like they're watching you. I noticed it while hauling firewood one afternoon. That sense of being observed. Not sharply, not urgently, but patiently. Like something had all the time in the world and was content to wait until I noticed. I turned in a slow circle. Trees. Snow. Lake. Nothing moved. Still, the feeling didn't leave. That night, the radio turned on by itself. I hadn't touched it in days. It sat on the shelf above the table, old and scarred, its antenna bent at an angle like a broken finger. Static hissed softly, filling the room with a low, crawling sound. I stood there for a long moment, heart hammering, before stepping closer. The emergency channel. I reached for the dial. A voice slipped through before I could turn it off. "Can you hear me?" The sound quality was poor, thin, stretched, like it had traveled too far to arrive intact. A man's voice. Tired. Cold. I leaned closer without realizing it. "Yes," I said. "I can hear you." Static swallowed my words. The voice returned, quieter now. "If you're alone." The transmission cut. I waited, counted my breaths. The radio stayed silent. I told myself it was interference. Old equipment. Atmospheric conditions. The kind of rational explanations you cling to when the alternative feels too close. Still, I unplugged the radio and turned it face down. Sleep didn't come easily after that. I lay awake listening to the cabin settle, to the lake shifting beneath ice, to the way the wind threaded itself through the trees like fingers through ribs. At some point, I realized there was another sound layered beneath it all. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Circling the cabin. I held my breath. The steps stopped just outside the bedroom wall. I imagined someone standing there, close enough that I could hear their breath if they exhaled hard enough. A knock followed. 3 taps, evenly spaced. I didn't move. A voice spoke, muffled by the wall and the snow. "Hey," it said. "You in there?" Relief flooded me before fear could catch up. Another person. A mistake. A hiker maybe. Someone lost. I opened my mouth to answer, and stopped. The voice sounded wrong. Not distorted. Not monstrous. Familiar. It sounded exactly like mine. "Please," the voice said softly. "It's freezing out here." My heart began to race, fast and shallow. I stayed still, staring at the wall as if it might open on its own. The voice waited. Then it sighed, and walked away. The footsteps receded, slow and unhurried, until the forest swallowed them whole. I didn't sleep at all after that. Morning brought no answers. No footprints. No marks in the snow. The world reset itself, smooth and untouched, as if the night had never happened. Except for the radio. It sat upright on the table, plugged in, and quietly hissing with static. By February, time stopped behaving normally. Days stretched thin and colorless, while nights folded in on themselves, dense and endless. I began marking lines on the wall to track the passing days, but the numbers stopped making sense. Sometimes I woke convinced I'd slept for minutes, only to find the lantern burned low and the generator coughing like it had been running for hours. Other times, I'd swear an entire day vanished between chopping wood and boiling snow. The cold never eased. It pressed inward, testing my patience, my thoughts, my grip on what felt real. I stopped trusting silence. Silence was when things moved. It started small. A chair angled slightly away from the table when I knew I'd pushed it in. The axe leaning against the wrong wall. My boots, damp with melted snow, even though I hadn't gone outside. Each time I told myself I'd forgotten. Fatigue does that. Isolation too. But the cabin felt rearranged. Like someone was learning how I lived. The radio became worse. Even unplugged, it whispered. At first, it was just static bleeding into the room, a faint hiss under everything else. Then words began to surface. Half-phrases, unfinished thoughts. Still here. Don't look at the lake. We tried to leave. One night, I snapped and threw a blanket over it. The voices continued, muffled but insistent, like people speaking from the other side of a wall. I began sleeping with the rifle nearby. The footprints appeared after the third storm. I found them just beyond the tree lean. Bare feet pressed deep into the snow, toes splayed as if the ground burned. They circled the cabin once before heading toward the lake. I followed them for a few steps, then stopped. They were my size. Same length. Same worn pattern on the heel. I backed away slowly, every nerve buzzing, and returned inside. I bolted the door, checked the windows, counted my breaths until my hands stopped shaking. That afternoon, I found the journal. It lay half buried near a hollow log I'd passed a dozen times before, wrapped in oilcloth, stiff with age. I don't remember deciding to open it. Only the feeling that it had been waiting for me. The first entry was dated 37 years earlier. Cold came early. Lake froze fast. Heard voices on the ice last night. Different handwriting followed. Different years. Different people. Same story. Isolation. Voices. Reflections that moved wrong. People hearing their names spoken from the dark. People seeing loved ones who shouldn't be there. And then the pattern emerged. Every journal ended the same way. Abruptly. No final entry explaining escape. No goodbye. Just silence. One line, written again and again in different hands, appeared near the end of each. Winter keeps what listens to it. That night, the knocking returned. Not on the door. On the walls. Soft at first. Then clearer. As if fingertips traced the cabin's outline, learning its shape. I stood in the center of the room, rifle shaking in my hands, lantern light casting warped shadows across the logs. A whisper slid through the cracks. "We know you're awake." My throat tightened. "Go away." A pause. Then dozens of voices answered at once. Men, women, children, layered and calm. "We are away. You came to us." The lantern flickered. For a moment, I saw shapes pressed against the frost-coated windows. Faces without detail. Pale ovals watching. I shut my eyes. When I opened them, the windows were empty. The caretaker appeared 2 days later. I was hauling ice from the lake when I noticed him standing near the far shore, a dark figure against white nothing. He didn't wave. Didn't call out. Just waited. I approached carefully. Boots crunching loud in the stillness. "You shouldn't be here," he said before I could speak. His voice sounded worn thin by years of cold. His eyes never left the ice. "What is this place?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "A winter that learned to listen." I told him about the voices. The knocking. The footprints. He nodded once. "They always start by sounding human." "Why?" I asked. He finally looked at me then. His expression was not afraid. It was resigned. "Because winter doesn't hunt," he said. "It waits." Before I could ask anything else, he turned and walked away. Steps sinking into snow that smoothed itself behind him, erasing his path. That night, the reflections began. I caught it by accident. Passing the window, I glimpsed movement on the lake. I stopped. My reflection stood on the ice. Closer than I was to the glass. It lifted its hand. I didn't. I stumbled back, heart slamming, pulse roaring in my ears. When I looked again, the ice was empty. I boarded the windows. It didn't help. The voices learned patience. They stopped calling constantly. Instead, they waited until I was tired, distracted, weak. While cooking. While half asleep. While staring into the fire, letting memories surface. They spoke in my voice. They spoke in my mother's. They spoke in the voices of people I hadn't thought about in years. One night I answered. "I know you're not real," I said, staring at the dark corner of the room. "You're just the cold messing with my head." A whisper came back immediately. "Then why do we know what you regret?" The cabin seemed to lean inward. The radio snapped on. A new voice emerged, clearer than the rest. "We survived the cold," it said. "We didn't survive the winter." The words sank into me slowly, like frostbite. I stopped eating properly. Stopped shaving. Stopped marking days. My reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Eyes too hollow, skin stretched tight. One morning, I woke to find the journal open on the table. A new page had been added. In my handwriting. "It's easier if you stop fighting. Winter takes the sharp edges off." I tore the page out and burned it. The smoke smelled wrong. Sweet. Rotting. The lake began cracking in patterns again. 3 long groans. A pause. Then one sharp knock. Always at night. Always calling me closer. I knew then what it wanted. Not my body. My place. And winter still had weeks left. The storm arrived without warning, as if winter had been holding its breath and finally decided to exhale. I woke to the sound of something heavy striking the cabin. Once, twice, then again, harder. Wind screamed through the trees, shaking the walls so violently dust drifted down from the beams. Snow hurled itself against the windows, blotting out what little light the moon offered. The world beyond the cabin vanished, erased in white. The generator coughed, sputtered, then died. Darkness fell instantly. For a moment, there was nothing but the storm and my own breathing. Then the cold surged in, fast and aggressive, like it had been waiting for permission. Frost bloomed across the walls in pale veins. My breath fogged thick and white. The radio turned on. I hadn't plugged it in. Static roared, louder than it ever had before, filling the cabin until my teeth vibrated. Then the voices broke through, not whispers anymore, not fragments. Full sentences. Calm. Certain. "You stayed too long. You listened. You heard us." I backed toward the door, heart slamming so hard it hurt. "Shut up," I said, my voice thin. "Just shut up." The static dipped. One voice emerged, clear and close, as if standing right beside me. "Do you know why winter is quiet?" I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Because it's counting." The knocking began. Not from one place, everywhere at once. Walls, ceiling, floor. 1,000 slow, deliberate impacts, as if the cabin itself were being tested for weakness. Each knock echoed inside my chest. I ran for the bedroom, slammed the door, shoved the dresser in front of it. The knocking followed, fingertips drumming against the wood, patient and rhythmic. Then came the voices, right outside the door. My voice. "Open it," it said gently. "You're freezing." Another voice joined in. My mother's. "You don't have to be alone anymore." I screamed and fired the rifle into the door. The shot was deafening in the small space. Wood splintered. The voices stopped. Silence rushed in, thick, oppressive. Then laughter rippled through the cabin. Not cruel. Not mocking. Relieved. The dresser slid an inch away from the door on its own. I stumbled back, shaking. The floorboards creaked as something moved through the cabin. Not walking, not crawling, but spreading. Cold pooled around my ankles, climbed my legs, numbing skin through layers of clothing. The walls groaned. The cabin leaned. The door burst open. Beyond it was not the living room. It was the lake. Ice stretched out where the floor should have been, glowing faintly blue under a dead sky. Snow fell upward, drifting toward darkness instead of the ground. The wind smelled like deep water and rot. Figures stood on the ice. Dozens of them. Men and women wrapped in old winter coats, modern jackets, threadbare scarves. Some barefoot. Some bleeding frostbite black toes. All staring at me with hollow familiarity. Their faces shifted. Some wore my face. Others wore the faces of people from the journal. People I recognized without knowing how. A man stepped forward. His beard was frozen solid to his chest. His eyes were bright, alert. "We don't die here," he said. "We endure. What do you want?" I cried. He tilted his head. "What you wanted." The ice cracked beneath my feet. I stumbled forward, slipping, arms flailing. Cold air tore at my lungs. The figures closed in, not rushing, not grabbing, just narrowing the space until there was nowhere else to stand. A woman reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was numb, hard as ice. "You ran from your life," she said softly. "Winter understands that." The lake groaned, deep, seismic. The ice split open behind me. Black water surged up, sloshing over the frozen surface. The cold was immediate and total, stealing breath, stealing thought. I screamed as my legs plunged into it. Pain exploding into white nothing. Hands grabbed me. So many hands. They pulled, not down, not up, but through. Through the cold, through the fear, through something inside me that I didn't know could tear. Memories burst loose. The divorce papers. The empty apartment. The nights staring at the ceiling, wishing everything would just stop. The voices swelled. "You listened. You stayed. You're ready." I thrashed, choking, lungs burning. The water climbed to my chest, my neck. Ice pressed against my jaw. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Running. Someone shouting my name. I twisted my head and saw a figure sprinting across the ice toward the cabin. Panic in their posture, breath fogging hard. It was me. Healthier. Warmer. Eyes wide with terror. The realization hit harder than the cold. One stays. One leaves. No. I screamed or tried to. Water rushed into my mouth. The figures hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty rippled through them. The other me slipped, fell, scrambled back up. He looked at the lake, at the ice breaking beneath me, and screamed my name again. Raw, desperate. Something in the crowd shifted. A voice, older than the rest, spoke from everywhere at once. Balance must be kept. Hands tightened around my arms. I felt myself sinking, strength bleeding away. The cold was no longer pain. It was numb, vast, inviting. I locked eyes with the other me. He reached the shore. He turned. He ran for the cabin. The hands released me. I dropped. Water closed over my head, crushing, silent, infinite. The lake swallowed my scream. I don't remember the moment I stopped struggling. I remember the quiet afterward. A deep, endless quiet that felt like rest. Then, something else. Awareness. I opened my eyes. I was standing on the ice. Whole. Dry. Cold but not dying. The storm had ended. The lake lay smooth and unbroken, reflecting a gray dawn sky. The figures stood around me, fewer now. One approached, the bearded man. "You'll learn," he said. "Winter teaches slowly." I looked toward the cabin. Smoke rose from the chimney. Movement flickered behind the window. Someone was inside. Someone alive. "Can I leave?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "Everyone leaves." The cold settled deeper into my bones, permanent and patient. I turned toward the trees, toward the waiting silence, toward the long winter that had finally learned my name. Spring arrived late that year. The snow melted slowly, reluctantly, as if the world itself were unwilling to let go of winter. When rescue teams finally reached White Elk Lake, they found the cabin standing quietly amid a gray, waterlogged landscape. The door was closed. Windows frosted but intact. The smell of melted snow and wood smoke lingered faintly, a ghost of the storm that had ravaged the place. Inside, nothing had been disturbed. Cans of food lined the shelves. Firewood stacked neatly. The journal lay open on the table, its pages damp, the ink smudged and unreadable in places. No footprints led to or from the cabin. No tracks in the snow. No sign of me or anyone else. Only the faint hum of the radio, still plugged in and softly crackling with static. The locals whispered their usual warnings. "They disappear sometimes," one of them said. "People come for the winter and the lake. And they're gone. No bodies. No evidence. Just empty cabins and echoes." I never returned. I went south, where the snow never lasted past January, where the silence wasn't alive, didn't move or watch, where voices couldn't follow me from another place. I rented a small apartment, filled it with heat and noise, lights and appliances, the hum of life surrounding me. I tried to forget the lake, the cabin, the winter that had claimed so many before me. But some nights when the city is still and the apartment is quiet, I hear it. A faint knock against the window, soft as a warning. The hum of static from some forgotten radio. A whisper, carried through the cold of my memory. Winter doesn't let you leave the same. I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening. Sometimes I think I see a reflection in the glass of my apartment window that isn't mine. Eyes too hollow, shoulders too tense. And I remember the lake, the ice, the figures standing silently, waiting. Waiting to reclaim what was theirs. I no longer answer the phone when it rings at night. I no longer walk in silence. I check the locks twice, thrice, but the feeling of being observed never leaves. Because the winter followed. It is patient, unrelenting, watching, learning, and somewhere far to the north, my cabin still stands. Smoke rises from the chimney at dawn. Footsteps press into the snow around it. Barefoot, careful, deliberate. Someone or something is there. Waiting. I survived, yes. But survival is a slow burn, a permanent ache. The winter has left its mark, and I carry it with me everywhere I go. The shadows move differently in my apartment. The cold lingers longer than it should. And sometimes, when I hear voices in the static or see shapes at the corner of my vision, I know the truth. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you believe. It only waits. And when you hear yourself calling from the dark, remember this. Winter doesn't forgive. Winter doesn't forget. Winter always comes back. Even when you think you've escaped. Even when you've gone south, far away. Even when the snow melts. Because it learns your name. And it waits. Forever.